Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sadashiva Samharambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Namaskara to all. This is your host Soumya. Welcome everyone to the 5th edition of Global Festival of Oneness 2024. This is a month-long festival on Adi Shankaracharya Bhagavadpada, covering various aspects and topics of Advaita Vedanta. Today's topic is Apaurusheyatva of Veda and its relevance in Vedanta by Sri Venkataraghavan ji. Let me introduce the speaker to you. Sri Venkataraghavan ji is a keen student of Advaita Vedanta, having studied the Prasthana-traya from Swami Paramatmananda ji and Advaita Siddhi with his commentary and Laghu Chandrika from Mahamahopadhyaya Manidravil Shastikal. He is currently translating the Siddhi into relatively simple English on his website www.advaitasiddhi.com. On a professional front, he is the founder of ARG, an energy technology business in London that has developed a cleaner form of energy and was sold to Nasdaq listed company in 2023. A former investment banker and finance profession by training, he studied computer engineering at Nanyang Technology University in Singapore, followed by an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. With that introduction, let's begin the talk. Kindly note, the speaker was not able to join us live, so he has sent a recording which we shall be playing shortly.
Harihi Om. Gananam tva ganapatigum havamahe kavim kavinam upamashravastamam jyeshtharajan brahmanam brahmanispadaan shrinvannu upidiссita sadanam. Om Shri Mahaganapatage Namaha. Sharada Sharadam Bhoja Vadana Vadanam Bhuje Sarvada Sarvada Smakam Sannidhim Kriyat Bhaktaramasādya Yameva Nitya Saraswati Swartha Samanvitasīt Nirasta Dustarka Kalanka Panka Namamitam Shankara Marchitangrim. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Yomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavanto Punah Punaha. Prahlada Varado Devo Yon Nrisimha Paro Harihi Nrisimho Pasakam Nityam Tam Nrisimha Gurum Bhaje. Sri Satchidananda Shivabhinavya Nrisimha Bharat Kyabhidan Yatindran Vidyanidhin Mantranidhin Sadatmanishtan Bhaje Manava Shambhurupan. Sadatmadhyana Niratam Vishayebhyaf Parang Mukham Naumi Shastreshu Nishnatam Chandrasekhara Bharatim Vivekinam Mahapragyam Dhairya Udarya Kshamanidhim Sadabhinava Purvam Tam Vidyatirtha Gurum Bhaje. Bharati Karunapatram Bharati Padabhushanam Bharati Padamarudham Bharati Tirthamashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tattvagyam Vidushekhara Bharati. Namaste to everyone, and I would like to thank the organizers of Advaita Academy for inviting me to talk in this global festival of oneness. The topic that has been assigned to me is the Apaurusheyatva of the Vedas. So, first of all, before we enter into this topic, we have to understand the conceptual framework that we are operating within. As we know, there are 10 darshanas or systems of philosophy in ancient India. 6 of them are the Astika darshanas and 4 of them are the Nastika darshanas. Astika and Nastika in this context refer to those that accept the validity of the Vedas and those that do not. So those that accept are Astika, and those that do not accept the validity of the Vedas are Nastika darshanas. The 6 Astika darshanas are Sankhya Yoga, Nyaya Vaisheshika, Purvottara Mimamsa. And the 6 Nastika darshanas are, and the 4 Nastika darshanas, I beg your pardon, are the 3 forms of Buddhism which are being grouped into one. There is the Jainism, there is the Lokayatika and the Charvaka darshanas. So, if you look at this conceptual framework, the reasons for the classification into this are in terms of what is the epistemological basis for these systems of philosophy. According to Uttara Mimamsa or Vedanta, there are 6 means of knowledge. There is Pratyaksha, perception; Anumana, inference; Shabda, verbal testimony; Upamana or similarity; Arthapatti or logical or circumstantial inferencing; and finally it's Anupalabdhi or Abhava Pramana, or the Pramana for absence. Pratyaksha is essentially direct knowledge, immediate knowledge that is gained through the sense organs. So the sense of sight, smell, touch, taste, etc. The Anumana or logical inference operates where Pratyaksha is not able to operate to know the object of the knowledge. So if there is fire in the mountain and you're not able to see the fire, but you infer its presence through the presence of smoke. So perception still works in the sense that perception is the basis by which you see the smoke, but perception is not sufficient to see the fire because it is hidden somewhere in the mountain. But you use the perception of fire to infer the presence of perception of smoke to infer the presence of fire. That's Anumana or inference. Parvato Vaniman, Dhumavatva. The mountain is on fire because I see it enveloped by smoke. That's the inferential reasoning that one comes up with. And then there is Shabda Pramana or the Vedas, which is the subject matter of this discussion. We'll come back to that. And the 6 Astika Darshanas accept the validity of the Vedas to various degrees. So the Vedanta accepts it in completion, in toto, the validity of both the Purva Bhaga, which is the ritualistic portion, and the Uttara Bhaga, which is the philosophical portion, the Upanishads, are accepted in totality. If you and we will come to the basis for why that is the case as we go through this talk. Then you have Upamana, wherein through similarity you identify something. You look at a bison in the forest, but you don't know it's a bison. But you have been informed reliably that a bison is an animal that lives in the forest which looks like a buffalo. And then when you look at that creature, it looks like a buffalo. And so based on that similarity, you come up with the Upamana that this is indeed a bison that's in the forest. And then you have Arthapatti, where you, through circumstantial inference, you come up with the knowledge. So when there are 2 Pramanas which are in contradiction, Arthapatti comes to the rescue to preserve the validity of both Pramanas. So for example, you have a friend, Devadatta, who is obese. You can see that he is obese. And you can also see that he doesn't eat during the daytime at all. So there are 2 perceptive pieces of knowledge that are in contradiction. He is obese, but you don't see him eat at all. And therefore, you need to then come up with a way of resolving that contradiction. And then the way you resolve the contradiction is that you infer, or you come up with the Arthapatti that he must be eating at night time. Otherwise, why would he continue to be obese and with no loss of weight? So that's the Arthapatti that comes there. And then you have Abhava Pramana, wherein you infer the absence of something by looking for that thing, and if you don't see it, then you infer it must be absent. So for example, you go to Devadatta's house and you don't see him in there, and therefore you conclude that he is outside the house. So it's the Anupalabdhi. Anupalabdhi of Devadatta leads you to believe that he is absent there. Upalabdhi means the obtaining or perceiving that presence. Anupalabdhi means not obtaining that presence, and therefore you infer its absence. One of the conditions of Anupalabdhi is that it's Yogyanupalabdhi, that is, it needs to be capable of being perceived. That is, if I had If it was there, I would have seen it. It can't be something which is like microscopic in nature, so you can't see it with the naked eye. So, and therefore, something which is yogya, which is capable of being perceived, but is not being perceived, and therefore you use that absence of perception to prove that it is absent. So, this absence of proof is proof of absence is kind of based on this Anupalabdhi Pramana, but the important corollary is that it needs to be yogya. So it's absence of proof where proof is basically possible, and therefore you infer you come up with the proof of absence. The famous saying in English is absence of proof is not proof of absence, and that's because not everything is capable of being proven or capable of being perceived, and that is outside the scope of Anupalabdhi. Now, we are going to use this concept of Anupalabdhi in determining the Apaurusheyatva of the Vedas also. So first of all, if you look at these various means of knowledge, the Shabda Pramana or verbal testimony is what is the subject matter of our discussion today. And essentially what we are trying to say is, in Vedanta, we are followers of what is known as Swatah Pramanyam, Paratah Apramanyam. That is, every knowledge, according to us, arises with it a knowledge of its validity also. So when you look at an object and you say that is an apple, you also are aware that the knowledge that is an apple is valid knowledge. When it arises itself, it arises with the knowledge of its validity. But does that mean that then the natural question is going to be, then every knowledge becomes valid knowledge? But that's not the case. We don't experience that to be a universal truth, that everything that we see, everything that we know is correct. We know several things that we are mistaken about, and then we later realize it is wrong, right? So there is definitely scope for mistaken knowledge as well. So how does Vedanta explain that? To which the answer given is, yes, we are saying Swatah Pramanyam, that Pramanyam is in the rise of that knowledge. But if that is later contradicted by something else, that is something which is outside the knowledge itself, contradicts the validity of the knowledge, then we are willing to concede that that knowledge can be falsified, that knowledge can be incorrect. So it's Paratah Apramanyam. So if you look at the Vedic Apaurusheyatva, essentially we are not saying that the Vedas are Apaurusheya because we need to preserve its validity. Because according to us, the validity of a thing is intrinsic to itself. Therefore, the reason for Apaurusheyatva is not because we are trying to somehow preserve validity. So what is this Apaurusheyatva? So essentially what we are saying is that Vedas are not something which are created, so to speak. That is the first thing. So according to us, they were not composed by a human being by understanding the meaning through some other means of knowledge. Like people were sitting in yogic meditation, they came up with a realization and put that realization into words, and that became the Vedas. That is not the claim that is being made here. The claim that is being made here is that the Vedas are not of human origin at all. It is not a case of artham buddha shabda rachana. That is, you know the object of what the Vedas are trying to convey, and through some other means of knowledge, and then you compose, then Shabda Rachana happens, composition happens. That is not what is being said here. What is being said here is that the words were received in a never-ending line of Guru Sishya Parampara. That is, every teacher taught to his student, and that student became the teacher for the next generation, and so on and so forth. That is, even the rishis associated with the mantras. So we say Savitya Rishi Vishwamitra. The rishi of the famous Gayatri mantra is Vishwamitra. But even Vishwamitra did not compose the words of the Gayatri mantra, Rather, that the rishis are mantra drashtas, they are the seers of the mantra, not the mantra kartas, they are not the composer of the mantras. That is a fundamental point. Now, the claim that the Purva Mimamsaka, so the opponent of the Veda Apaurusheyatva theory, is making the claim that the Purva Mimamsakas, essentially Kumarila Bhatta, Prabhakar Mishra, etc., were operating in an environment which was inimical to the Vedas. And therefore, with a view of protecting its validity, they came up with the theory of Apaurusheyatva. And that was used to protect the validity of the Vedas. That is, the claim that the opponent is making is that the Buddhists had rejected the Vedas as meaningless words, just forcing people to conduct these crazy sacrifices, and therefore there's no benefit from them. This was the claim that the Buddhists were making. And the Purva Mimamsakas therefore had to come up with this theory of Apaurusheyatva to protect the validity of the Vedas. But that is not the case. Because if you look at the idea of the Apaurusheyatva of the Vedas, it is found not in the words of Kumarila Bhatta, it's found even in the sutras. So for example, if you look at the Jaiminian sutras, Akhya Pravachanat 1.130, it holds that the names of the rishis that are associated with a particular recension of the Veda are not because that particular rishi composed it, it is because those rishis expounded on those Vedic recensions. And if you look at the next claim is there are like lots of words that occur in the Veda, lots of proper nouns of names of kings, etc. There's this famous battle of 10 kings that is described in the Vedas in the Rig Vedas specifically. And the opponent then says well, if the Vedas were like not composed by human beings, if they were not essentially describing what people had experienced, how is it that there are various stories occurring in the Veda, descriptions of battles being fought, descriptions of names being fought, or names of people? Doesn't that mean that these were historical personalities, and therefore all of this means that the Vedas are not Apaurushaya? Because if they were of like not of human origin, how do you explain a historical event occurring? Because the claim that we in Vedanta and Purva Mimamsa are making is that the Vedas are Apaurushaya. They are not of human origin. They are not of divine origin either. The Vedas were not created. That's the claim that we are making. If the Vedas were not created, how is it that there are certain names occurring in the Veda? And to answer this, the sutra Parantu Shruti Samanya Matram 1.131, after the previous sutra, holds that the proper names that in the Vedas are not the names of people. They are simply common names, and any similarity with like names occurring today is only a similarity of the sounds. So the claim that Kumarila Bhatta, the Purva Mimamsaka, invented this concept of Apaurusheyatva to help him in his intellectual debate with the Buddhists is incorrect, because the idea was mentioned in the sutra by Jaimini himself. And so then there becomes this point about this battle of the 10 kings that takes place. And one of the claims is that there's a very similar battle with very similar names mentioned in the Zendavesta, right? The book of the Zoroastrians. And therefore, the Zendavesta passage means that this is actually recording a particular event in history, and the Rig Veda has also recorded the same event in history. So therefore, the claim that the Vedas are Apaurushaya, that they are not recording historic events, is falsified. This is the argument made by the opponent. But this is not correct, because essentially what this is saying is that two different cultures are recording the same event in history. Now, first of all, we need to understand when stories occur in the Veda, what is the purpose of these stories? So according to us, the Arthavada, so this an Arthavada is a story, right? It occurs in the Veda. It says like Sorodi, Rudra cried, and there are like various stories. There's Agni hid in the water and so on and so forth to protect the gold, and there are like various stories occurring in the Veda. So according to us, Arthavada occurring in the Vedas is not a report of events. It is not telling a story for the story's sake. There is a purpose behind this. The Rishi is not recording an event that he heard or he saw. Rather, he is merely transmitting the words themselves. The reference to the battle of the 10 kings in this context is somewhat dubious. Because, dubious meaning that it refers to a particular battle that took place. That claim is dubious. Because, let's look at where these mantras occur. The mantras occur in the 7th mandala of the Rig Veda. And it's attributed to Vasishtha Rishi. And various scholars allege that the names of these 10 kings refer to 10 different tribes. So there are the Purus, the Yadus, the Matsyas, Druhyus, Paktas, Bhalanasas, Alinas, Vishanis, Shivas, Vaikarnas, Anus, etc. But if you look at the mantra itself and you look at the commentary by Acharya, the words Pakta, Bhalana, Alina, Vishani, Shivas, many of these words don't refer to tribes at all, but refer to various participants in the Vedic sacrifice. So the mantra is Paktaso, Bhalanaso, Bhanantalinaso, Vishaninaha Shivasaha, Ayo Nayatsadhama, Aryascha Gavya, Tritsubhyo, Ajagan Yudha Nrn. And Acharya here says, Paktasaha, Patha Havisham Pachakaha. So, Paktasaha refers to those that cook the offerings in the sacrifice. Bhalanasaha Bhadramukaha, Bhaleti Bhadravachi. So essentially, he's saying Bhalanasas are again not a tribe. They are those who speak the auspicious words. They are those that say the mantras in the sacrifice. Alinasaha, Alinaha, Tapobihi Apravriddhaha Ityarthaha. That is, those that have not practiced austerities. Alinaha. Vishaninaha. Vishaninaha Kanduyanartham Krishna Vishana Hasta Dikshita Ityarthaha. That is, those that are bearing the Vishanas. Vishanas means horns, the horns of the black deer. And the purpose of this is for scratching. So, the Dikshitas, the Yajamanas, etc., who have undergone the ritualistic purification to conduct the sacrifice, who have the Diksha, they are not permitted to scratch themselves when the sacrifice is happening with their hands. So, for that, they need to use a horn of a black deer if they need to scratch themselves. These take place over several days, etc. It's human tendency to scratch yourself, especially if you're dry. And therefore, but you can't do it because the Vedas prohibit you from doing it when you're taken up the Diksha. So you have a Vishana to do that. Then Shivasaha Shivaha Yagadina Sarvastya Lokasya Shivakaraha Yagenihi Shivam Bhavati Lokasya. So here the Shivasas are those who do good for the world through the performance of the sacrifice. So contrary to the claim that this is referring to the battle of 10 kings, each of these words actually refer to various participants in the sacrifice. So, if you read the mantra without the understanding of the niyoga or how that mantra is essentially being enjoined in a particular sacrifice, then you come up with like a spurious interpretation which essentially leads to doubts. And a spurious interpretation cannot challenge a traditionally accepted claim of Apaurusheyatva. Like if you look at the reference to the Yadus, right, or the Yakshus, the mantra 7.18.6 says, Purola Ittur Vasho Yakshurasi Raye Matsyaso Nishita Apiva Shrushtim Chakrur Bhragavo Druhyavascha Sakha Sakhayam Atarad Vishuchoho. But if you look at the word, commentary of the word Yakshu, which is interpreted as a tribe, Acharya again says, Yakshuhu Yajna Kushalaha, he who is skilled in the sacrifice. So, this is referring to a king called Turvasha who was skilled in the sacrifice, who essentially destroyed the city of the Matsyas. The Bhragus and the Druhyas were his allies, but he was defeated by Indra. So, this is actually referring to a particular sacrifice that is to be conducted, and the defeat of that particular king by Indra, etc., is not to say that there was a battle that took place and Indra, a particular king, came and destroyed it, but rather it is to praise or enjoin a particular sacrifice. So that is the reason why Arthavada is there. The Arthavada is there not for the story's sake, but as an advertisement to undertake a particular ritual. They'll say, if you want this particular outcome, you conduct this ritual, and by the way, those that conducted these rituals in the past have succeeded. And whether that happened or not is not really important. The importance is given to the actual ritual itself, is to the injunction to perform that ritual. Now, irrespective of the number of kings that whatever in the battle, that itself is no evidence that a battle actually took place. So as we said, the validity of the Arthavada in the Karmakanda is in having ekavakyata with the vidhi or the nishedha. That is, in having consonance with a particular injunction or with a particular prohibition. That is, to enjoin someone to do a particular act or to prohibit from someone act. So the story is not mentioned as a news report, but is to actually impel someone into performing an action or to compel someone from not taking a particular action. So that's because, okay, so then if we look at so let's move on to what it is that we mean by Apaurusheyatva. So if you look at the Apaurusheyatva definition that we are referring to, so if you look at the Vedanta Paribhasha, for example, Apaurusheyatva, what is it that we are seeking to prove here? Right? Apaurusheyatva means a Paurusheya, that which is not Paurusheya. And what is Paurusheya? Purushena Kritatvam is Paurusheyatvam. That is, being created by a person is Paurusheyatvam. And how do you define what is Purushena Kritatvam? Swajatiya Ucharana Nirapekshana Ucharana Katvam. So let me repeat that. Paurusheyatvam is Swajatiya Ucharana Nirapeksha Ucharana Kattam. That is, having an utterance which is not dependent on utterance of the same form. So this is like complicated, right? So why are we defining Paurusheyatvam in this manner? So if you look at the any particular kavya or itihasa, so if you have Raghuvamsha, you have Ramayana, Mahabharata, etc. Now, when I utter a particular line from the Raghuvamsa, when I utter it, I am not uttering it for the first time. I have uttered it on the basis of my teacher teaching it to me, or me reading it from a particular book. So I read it from a book and I utter it. So my utterance is not independent of a similar utterance before it, right? It's on the basis. It is on the basis of the previous utterance. So as far as I am concerned, this has come to me from tradition. But then you look at where did my teacher get it from? My teacher got it from his teacher. Where did his teacher get it from? His teacher got it from his teacher. Ultimately, you go up in the sequence of these teachers and you come to Kalidasa. And when Kalidasa utters a particular line from the Raghuvamsha, his utterance is based on nobody else's utterance before him, unlike everybody else after him. His utterance is on the basis of a particular, is on the basis of no other utterance before him, and therefore, as far as Kalidasa is concerned, that is a Paurusheya Vakya. And therefore, every single utterance after that is also a Paurusheya Vakya. Now, so it is Swajatiya Ucharana Nirapeksha Ucharanakattam as far as Kalidasa is concerned, and therefore the Raghuvamsa sentence is a Paurushaya sentence. Now, if you look at Apaurusheyatvam, what we are saying is, we are defining it as Swajatiya Ucharana Sapeksha Ucharanakattam. That is, every single utterance of the Veda is always based on an utterance before it. There was no time when the Veda was uttered for the first time by someone. That is the thing that we are trying to establish here. And the basis for establishing it is, if you examine every single utterance of the Vedas, I learnt it from my Guru learnt it from his Guru learnt it from his Guru, and so on and so on and so forth, until the beginning of creation. And at the beginning of creation, the Rishis received this Veda. Now, if you look at the tradition of what we are saying about this, one of the important basis for this and for this tradition is, if you look at ancient texts. So this is even before the time of Purva Mimamsa. We are talking way before Kumarala Bhatta, etc. If you go back to the even before Panini, for example, right? We have Acharya, who wrote the Nirukta, which is a commentary on the Nighantu. Nighantu is like a book which is like essentially like the it's like the thesaurus of that time, right? It's a thesaurus of Vedic words, looking at similes of Vedic words. And the Nirukta is one of the most ancient forms of grammar, of Vedic grammar. And it was composed by Acharya. Modern philosophers essentially say that Acharya was in the 7th to the 5th century BCE, before Common Era. The Purva Mimamsa Sutras by Jaimini are said to have been composed between 300 to 200 Common Era, according to Hirayana and other philosophers, other scholars. So we are talking about essentially nearly 1,000 years before the Purva Mimamsa Sutras by Jaimini themselves were composed. Acharya, and this is even before Panini, for example, Acharya defines what is a rishi. He says, Rishir darshanat stoman dadarsha iti aupamanyavaha tad yenan tapasyamanan brahmasvayambhu abhyanarashate tad drishayo bhavan tad drishinam rishittam iti vijñāyate. So he says there are these people called the rishis, and they call rishis because they have seen, they are seers. Rishihi darshanat. And he is quoting a teacher even before him. So Acharya in 700 BCE is quoting a teacher before him called Aupamanyava. Aupamanyava has said they are called, they have seen the stoma, mantras, stoman dadarsha iti Aupamanyava. They have seen the stoma, the mantras, through their austerities, and they have become rishis through the grace of Brahman. This is the Rishitva of the rishis. So Acharya, who predates the Purva Mimamsa, has quoted an Acharya even before him, who has said that the rishis are not the composers of the mantras, but they are the seers of the mantras. So if you look at this tradition, so this tradition did not come up by Purva Mimamsa to protect the Vedas from challenge by non-Vedic systems of knowledge. This is something to the intrinsic to the Vedas themselves. And this is the point that we're trying to say. So even the rishis themselves did not compose these mantras. They received these mantras from Swayambhu. So if you look at the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, there is a mantra, Yo Brahmanam Vidadhati Purvam, Yo Brahmanam Vidadhati Purvam, Yo Vai Vedamscha Prahinoti Tasmai. So it is essentially worshipping Ishvara, who has given the mantras to Brahma himself, and Brahma has taught it to his Shishyas, who are the first Shishyas are the Rishis, and the Rishis have then propagated these mantras. So none of these Rishis have composed these mantras, they have received these mantras. And so that is the claim. And the thing is, so what is the hetu for this? The hetu, or the reason for why we are saying, through which we are proving the sadhya. The sadhya is Swasamana Jatiya Ucharana Sapeksha Ucharana Katva. That is, this kind of Apaurusheyatva is proven because if there had been a author of the Vedas, tradition would have preserved this. If you look at the entire corpus of Hindu literature, Sanatana Dharma literature, you have the Itihasas, you have the Puranas, you have the Smritis. All of these have a very clear author. Tradition remembers the author. Tradition has preserved the name of the author. And therefore, if tradition has preserved the name of these authors, is because those authors exist. In the case of the Vedas, very, very ancient tradition, we have a textual basis to say that the Vedas are not Apaurushaya, because if they were Paurushaya, there would have been some evidence of the Vedas being created. So let's go back and look at the entire traditional corpus. There is no point in any system of philosophy. If you look at Nirukta, we looked at Purva Mimamsa, we looked at Uttara Mimamsa, we look at Paninian grammar as well, and we will come up with a few examples as to why we believe that this claim of Apaurusheyatva is preserved throughout the entire corpus of Sanatana Dharma literature, because if there had been an author, we would have preserved it. Because we are preserving the entire Vedas without change, why would we not preserve its author? And if the argument is, well, we are trying to, we have deliberately obscured the author because we want to essentially somehow get its validity. As we looked at earlier, there is no need for us to claim its validity on the basis of Apaurusheyatva. So this is where I was coming to earlier. Apaurusheyatva, or not having a human origin, is not necessary in our world view, because we view a thing to be valid intrinsically, and for it to be invalidated, you need something external to it. So if you want to invalidate the Veda, you have to take something outside the Veda to invalidate it. You have to prove that it is incorrect, that it is saying something which is manifestly incorrect. I don't have to say a reason as to why the Vedas are valid, because according to me, not just the Vedas, everything, every knowledge arises with a certificate of its validity anyway. So I'm not coming up with the doctrine of Apaurusheyatva to preserve the validity of the Vedas. The Swatah Pramanya Vada does not require Apaurusheyatva, right? Whereas, so you cannot level that charge against us, against tradition. And I have also established that if there had been a creator of the Vedas, the tradition would have preserved it. And we will look at other examples. So for example, in the Niruktam itself, Yaska says, Evam uchchavachaihi aviprayahi rishinam mantradrishtayo bhavanti. So these rishis have various aims. They may be higher aims or they may be lower aims. And with these aims, these rishis become mantra drashtas. They become the seers of the mantras. They are not mantra kartas again. And if you look at some examples, right? So let's look at the example of Mandala 6 of the Rig Veda. And if you look at 695 and 696. Dhruvam jyotir nihitam drishaye kam manu javishtham patayat swantah vishve devaha samanasaha saketa ekam kratumabhi viyanti sadhu. So if you look at the translation of this, it says, a steady light, swifter than thought, stationed among moving beings to show the way to happiness, all the gods being of one mind and of like wisdom, proceed respectfully to the presence of the one chief agent. Vime karna patayo vichakshur vidam jyotir hridaya ahitam yat vime manascharati dura adhihi kimsvid vakshyami kimunu manishye. My ears are turned to hear him, my eyes to behold him. This light that is in the heart seeks to know him. My mind, the receptacle of distant object, hastens towards him. What shall I declare him? How shall I comprehend him? So here the Vedic Rishi is describing the sacrifices, the meditation through which he is turning his mind inwards towards the inner light. Hridaye jyotihi ahitam yate. the mantra is describing the meditation of the rishi, and he says, my senses are turned towards him. I am trying to see him in the light of my heart. So this is not him composing something. This is him trying to see the mantras themselves. Again, the same idea occurs in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda. Yagyena vachah padaviyamayan tam anvavindan rishishu pravishtam tama bhritya vedaduh purutra tam saptarebha abhisam navante. So the Acharya says, tam vachaha margam yagyena ayan praptavantaha. The rishis, rishishu atindriyartha darshishu pravishtam tam vacham avindan alabhanta. So the rishis obtain the words. How do they obtain the words? Because they are capable of seeing that which is beyond the senses. How? Through sacrifices, through austerities, through meditation. Through meditation, they have refined their minds to such an extent that they become an atindriyartha darsha. They are able to see things which are beyond the senses, and through that, they are able to see the word. Tam vacham avindan alabhanta anantaram tam vacham amritya ahritya purutra bahushu desheshu vyadadhu vyakarshahu sarvan manushyan adhyapayamasuhu ityarthaha. That is, the rishis who have the capacity to see beyond the senses as a result of their meditation obtain the words themselves, and after having obtained these words, they spread it in various places, meaning they taught these words to humanity. So the Vedas themselves are saying this. Yagyena vachah padaviya mayan tam anvavindan rishishu pravishtam tama bhritya vedaduh purutra tam saptarebha abhisamnavante. So the rishis again obtained the words themselves. They did not compose the words. Again, so this is like the Rig Veda itself is saying this. This is not something that tradition has made it. It's the Vedas themselves are saying this. So if you connect this mantra with where the rishi has found, so he's meditating and he's searching that light within him, right? The previous mantra, if you look at mantra 696, Vime karno patayatu vichakshur vidam jyotir hridaya ahitam yate. He is turning his mind inwards to see the inner light, and then by having seen that inner light, yagyena vachas padaviyamayan tam anvavindan rishishu pravishtam. So having seen that inner light, the Vedas, the rishis have found these Vedic words in their hearts, and through those words they have then spread them. So this is not a case of them seeing a thing through their senses or through some other means of knowledge and then composing words to fit that meaning. Rather, they have received these words themselves. So if you look at the first verse of the Bhagavata Purana, Janmadyasya tonvayat itaratashthartheshvabhigya swarat tene brahma hridaya adikavaye muhyanti yat surayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trasargo mrisha dhamna svedas sada nirastakohakam satyam param dhimahi. This is the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And here also it says, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsuraya. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavi. So the Adikavi Brahma received the Vedic. So here Tene Brahma. Brahma here means Vedas. Adikavi means Chaturmukha Brahma Hiranyagarbha. So Ishvara implanted the Vedas in the heart of Brahma himself. But Ishvara himself does not have the flexibility to change these words, to change the order of these sentences. Because if you look at the Veda itself, it says Dhata Yatha Purvam Akalpayate. So Ishvara himself composed the Vedas like how it was in the previous Kalpa, previous creation. So every creation, the Ishvara first implants the Veda, which is of the same order of words, same order of sounds as in the previous creation. He implants it into the heart, into the mind of Brahma, and Brahma then telepathically transmits it to his students, the rishis, and the rishis then spread it to the rest of humanity. This is the Vedic system of knowledge propagation, which essentially is the basis for this Apaurusheyatva theory. So again, as we said, every utterance of the Veda therefore is based on an utterance of the Varnas in the same sequence. This applies to Jivas like us, but it also applies to Ishvara himself. And this is the Apaurusheyatva we are seeking to prove this. And if you look at the Vedanta Bhashya by Adi Shankara Bhagavadpada, in the Devatadhikarana, he acknowledges this himself. He says, Nityasya Shabdasya Nityenarthena Nitya Sambandhe Pratiyamane Yad Vaidike Shabde Pramanyam Sthitam. So he's saying the validity of Vedic words was already established, and this was on the basis of an eternal word having an eternal relation with an eternal object. So one of the challenges with the Vedas is that it contains words that refers to like a particular deity, Indra, Varuna, Mitra, etc. Now the opponent in this Devatadhikarana had alleged that there is no possibility of the Devatas having a physical body, or like even if not a physical body, it's a subtle body. There's no possibility of having a subtle body. Why? Because any body is always subject to destruction. So if it has a birth, it must end, and if it ends, then there is no entity that is corresponding to the term Indra, and therefore you cannot say that like Indra, this sacrifice is performed for Indra, etc. Indra, you're inviting Indra with various mantras. You're saying Agnaya Hivitaye Granano Havyadataye. You're essentially inviting Agni. You cannot have this if these deities are actually entities with bodies, because these bodies are subject to death, and if the bodies die, then the entities die as well, right? To which it was said previously, no, that's not the case. When you're saying that there is an eternal connection between word and its meaning, Vagartha viva samprakto, Vagartha prativattaya. So just like the word and the meaning have an eternal sambandha or a connection, that eternal connection does not mean it is a connection with an individual. It's a connection that is like the word Indra does not correspond to this particular Indra. It corresponds to that position occupied, the Indratva Padavi, the position occupied, and therefore any occupant of that is what is will automatically mean that Indra is there. So therefore the connection between the word and its meaning is not a connection between the word and the individual, it's a connection between the word and the universal, between the jati, not the vyakti. And therefore, even if the devatas have a physical body, there is no problem with the eternal word having an eternal connection with the eternal meaning. So this is what the Shankaracharya had said in the Devatadhikarana as well. So he acknowledges the Apaurusheyatva of the Vedas himself. And if you look at, so therefore, what is it that we are trying to establish through all this? What we're trying to say here is that there is no, if you look at we don't have to go with our own words, we can look at what Kumarala Bhatta said. So Kumarala Bhatta in the Shloka Vartikam, he says, Yatnataf pratishedhyanaf purushanam swatantrata. All we are seeking to do here, our efforts are directed to establish that in the manifestation of the Vedas, there is no independence to the individual. That is, the individual, like, so for example, when Kalidasa chose to write the Raghuvamsha, he had complete freedom in the kind of word, the order that he had to choose. He had complete creativity and complete freedom and independence in doing that. That is the nature of Paurusheya Vakya, Paurusheya sentences. Whereas in Apaurusheya sentences, what we are trying to refute is the independence of the individual, whether that is the Jiva or the Ishvara in the manifestation of the Vedas. So if we go on to like a few other examples, we look at like the relationship between grammar and Apaurusheyatva. One of the arguments that is being made is that if you look at the Rig Veda, the grammar that is associated in the Rig Veda appears to be a more ancient form of grammar, whereas the grammar that appears in the Brahmanas, etc., like of the Yajurveda and subsequent other Vedas, which are deemed to be later, is that grammar is more classical grammar, whereas the grammar in the Rig Veda is pre-classical, and there is a lot more conformance with the sutras of Panini. So it's more Panini based grammar in classical grammar, and the Brahmanas and the Upanishads etc. follow classical grammar, whereas the grammar in the Rig Veda is more ancient. And this means that that which is pre-classical, pre-Paninian, is the more ancient, and that which is classical, which is Paninian, is more recent. And this means that the Vedas were composed over a period of time, and that is why you have this difference in the grammar. This is the claim that is being made. Now, I think we need to first of all realize that this conformance or non-conformance with Paninian grammar is beside the point. Because first of all, Paninian grammar is by no means the first Sanskrit grammar. You should know that. There are more ancient grammars that he inherits and codifies himself. He refers to Acharya himself in Panini. Paninian grammar, so essentially if you look at his grammar, it comprises both Vedic forms and Laukika, worldly forms. So in like daily usage, right, word forms. With respect to Vaidika word forms, Panini himself acknowledges that he's only being descriptive here. He's not saying that this ought to be the way Vedic words are. He's simply saying this is how it is. He's describing it. Whereas if you look at worldly usage with respect to worldly word forms, Panini is being both descriptive. He's saying this is how people talk, but he's also saying this is the right way of saying. This is the right Vedic forms. Panini does not, or at least does not appear to, at any stage, claim that this is the way Vedic word forms ought to be. So if you look at like a particular Vedic word form, if it happens to be in consonance with Paninian grammar, great. That's not because it followed Panini. It's not because it's classical. Rather, it is because that particular word form was described by Panini. That's all. That description occurred, right? And so let's look at a few examples, right? So if you look at like there is one particular sutra, right? It is essentially, it's called Chandasi Banasana Rakshinitham. So this is Sutra 3.2.27. And essentially it says that in the Vedas, the in suffix comes after the verbs van to honor, san to worship, raksh to protect, ath to agitate, when the object is in composition. And the example for this is from the Rig Veda. This is Rig Veda Mandala 6. Utano Goshanim. The Siddhanta Kaumudi says, Ebhyaha karmani upapade in syat. Brahmavanintva Shatravanim. Utano Goshanim dhyam. Ye patham patirakshayaha. Chaturaksho patirasi. Havir mathina mabhi. Etc. So essentially, now the claim is that the Rig Vedic grammar is pre-classical. But here, you have an example given by Panini, which occurs in the Rig Veda. So if you're saying that Rig Veda is pre-classical, then how is it that Panini has described it? Because according to this, the Rig Vedic grammar should be very, very ancient, and there should be a lot of discrepancies with Paninian grammar. But here you have a case where Paninian grammar is describing it. And later, you have the sutra, Chandasiva Pramredita Yaho. Here, the sutra is saying that the letters may be substitute for the visarga before a hard guttural or a labial in the chandas, but not before a pra and not before a doubled word. But if you look at, there are various cases where the substitution doesn't take place. Surya Rashmehi Surya Rashmir Harikeshas Purastat Sanaspavakaha. Okay, in these cases, that particular Paninian sutra is not followed. But if you look at the Kashika Vritti, It says sarve vidhayas chandasi vikalpyante. So this is the basis for us to say that as far as the chandas is concerned, the Vedas are concerned, the rules don't always have to apply. So there's always an option. Sometimes the rules will apply, sometimes the rules will not apply. This does not. So the conformance or the non-conformance with the Vedas, the conformance and non-conformance with Paninian grammar is not a basis to determine whether a text is classical occurring in the post-Paninian period or pre-classical occurring in a pre-Paninian period, because you have so according to the opponents, the sixth mandala of the Rig Veda is the most ancient mandala, but there you have a Vedic form which is in consonance with Panini, and you have the various mantras in the Taittiriya Brahmana which are not in conformance with Panini. So you have both. You have things which are supposedly later. The Brahmanas, according to the opponents of Apaurusheyatva, are much later because they are classical, and the Rig Veda 6th mandala is pre-classical. So therefore the pre-classical one should not be in conformance with grammar, whereas the classical one should be in conformance with grammar. But you have examples of the opposite, as we have shown. So like the Utano Goshanim from the 6th mandala of the Veda is described by Panini. The Surya Rashmi Harikesha Spurastat, there you don't have the Sa substitution happening, because that particular sutra does not apply, and the Kashika Vritti says, well, it doesn't apply because the Sarve Vidayas Chandasi Vikalpyante, meaning that these rules don't also always have to apply in the case of the Vedas. So therefore, the conformance or the non-conformance with the Paninian rules is not a basis to say whether a particular text is pre-classical or post-classical. And therefore, you cannot determine the age of the Vedas based on the type of grammar that is present in. You cannot determine the age of the Vedas. You cannot determine that the Vedas are composed on the basis of the rishis' names being associated with the Veda. You cannot determine that the Vedas are composed on the basis of historical events that have been reported allegedly in the Veda. You cannot say that people have simply forgotten this, because we have a tradition of remembering other things. You cannot say that the Vedas have been deemed to be Apaurushaya to preserve the validity, because they would be valid anyway because of Swatah Pramanyavada. So, for all these reasons, the arguments against Apaurusheyatva fail. The most powerful argument for Apaurusheyatva is that there is absolutely no memory of a creator of these Vedas. The Vedas themselves admit that the words have been transmitted to the rishis. We looked at examples in the Veda that occurred. The Veda itself refers to itself Vacha Virupa Nityaya. So there the Rishi Virupa is saying that let me praise Agni with the use of the eternal word. So he himself is admitting, the Rishi himself is admitting, I am not the composer of the Veda, I am simply relaying something which is eternal anyway. So you have internal Vedic consonance with Apaurusheyatva. You have Nirukta, which occurred, which essentially was composed in the 7th to 5th century BCEs, 1000 years before Purva Mimamsa, saying that the mantras were seen by the rishis. You have the Jaiminian Purva Mimamsa Sutra, which says that the connection between word and its meaning is eternal, that any instances of names occurring in the Vedas are not references to actual people, but there's essentially a common noun. You have the Purva Mimamsa commentators. You have essentially the likes of Kumarala Bhatta, Prabhakara Mishra, Shabara Swami, etc., all saying that the Vedas are Apaurushaya. You have Shankara saying that the Vedas are Apaurushaya. Now, you have Acharya saying that the Vedas are Apaurushaya. There's a lot of internal evidence suggesting that the Vedas are Apaurushaya. And when we have preserved every single aspect of the Vedas, we have preserved the words themselves, we have preserved the exact order of those words, we have preserved the accents, right? The swaras have been absolutely preserved, and we have preserved this through like complicated mechanisms of chanting, like the Vikriti pathas, like Ghana patha, etc., which are like, and the reason for doing that is to preserve the Vedas in exactly the form it was received. And when we have done all this, we have not remembered the author of the Veda. Have we simply forgotten it? I mean, that is something which just stretches incredulity, right? We have remembered the author of the Ramayana, Valmiki. We have remembered the author of the Mahabharata, Veda Vyasa. We have remembered the author of the 18 Puranas. We have remembered the author of the Nirupta. We have remembered the author of the Purva Mimamsa Sutras. We have remembered the author of the Uttara Mimamsa Sutras. So the entire corpus of Hindu Sanatana Dharma literature, with the exception of the Vedas, we have preserved the author for. We have remembered the author. We have preserved every aspect of the Vedas that is physically possible to preserve, and we have somehow forgotten the author of the Vedas. This simply doesn't. And so this is the case of the Anupalabdhik Pramana. When if the Vedas had an author, we would have preserved it, like in the case of the Mahabharata, like in the case of the Ramayana, like in the case of the Puranas, like in the case of the Sutras. But we have not, and therefore there is no author. That is the logical basis for Apaurusheyatva. With that, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum for giving me the opportunity to discuss the concept of Apaurusheyatva, to discuss its the basis, its validity, and to give me the opportunity to defend it from modern attacks on its validity. I would like to thank the organizers, and I wish you a very happy Shankara Jayanti. I know it's been a month, but this month is to preserve this knowledge system and to use the birth anniversary of Adi Shankara Bhagavadpadacharya as a means, as a reason, as an occasion to celebrate our very, very vibrant knowledge base and to ensure that it's transmitted to future generations. And so I thank the organizers for conducting this event and for giving me the opportunity to present in this event. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Harihi Om.
Thank you, Sri Venkataraghavan for that excellent talk in defending the claim of Apaurusheyatva of Veda. Really enjoyed it. And thank you, viewers, for your participation. Please join us for tomorrow's morning session from 7 to 8. Can we have the flyer for tomorrow's topic? And tomorrow's topic is Adi Shankara's Acharya's spiritual vision of oneness and Ekatma Dhama by Smriti Sharma. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaskar.